Math podcast, and I have my preeminent and distinguished co-host, Kendra. Thank you for showing up today, Kendra, and your presence. And we have a special guest today for back to popular demand, Dr. Michele Finneran, and she is back for her second appearance. I am the Doctor of Digital, Mick Smith, and welcome to the show. Thanks again for coming back and agreeing, and we'll tell you about aftermath and the questions that we have encountered in the meantime.
Perfect. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Michele, we're so excited to have you for the first time. We're really excited to have you this time. And one of the things that we did after your first episode was ask for some audience questions or audience interaction. And so we have a couple of questions from the audience that we would love for you to address.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think I have them here. The one question was talking about longitudinal studies to show if divorce results from a lack of character. Can people change and work out their differences? I guess from a long-term standpoint, that's right. one question. And absolutely, I feel like people can change if they have a conscious awareness and they're willing to make some changes. People obviously can change. People, and just in general, we're people of flux anyway. We change without even knowing that we're changing. How I was a year ago is not how I am today, and we're just people of flux and change. Making distinct changes can happen methodically with conscious awareness, effort, and kind of strategy in order to make productive changes happen, whether it be in your relationship or your family. I think the second thing that he mentioned is parental responsibility, divorce and parental responsibility. Obviously, and parental alienation, necessary results. I feel like this all encompasses pretty much with the next question about parental alienation, which I think a lot of people are. It's kind of confusing because the term has been used and it's been in therapist language and in court system language and in household language. And I think people really don't understand what the consensus is because there's so many people using the terminology. So what it basically is parental alienation describes a process usually intentional. It's intentional by which a parent conveys through words, actions, or behaviors to the child that the other parent, or what I would say the targeted parent, is dangerous, unsafe, abusive, or bad, which results in the child becoming fearful or avoidant of the targeted parent. So that is pretty much the definition of parental alienation in summary. There is the DSM-5 the medical community has widely rejected the use of syndrome, parental alienation and syndrome, which has been tossed around a little bit, has made it into the DSM-5, but it's still we're still toying with that. I mean, with this being said, there's a couple things that I do want to get into with parental alienation and what basically what happens if a parent accuses another parent of what the parent should actually do if they're being accused of alienating their child. I think one of the things that in court systems, which is necessarily, people that don't know, it's a broken system, trying very hard. Somehow, some way, we need it to be fixed. It's very broken systemically. So I think that with the legal system, they can only go by proof, tangible evidence, what they can see. I think one of the things that can help is when the parent begins documenting the child's behaviors, specifically patterns of behavior and time frames, like when they come back from the parent that's targeting the other parent, patterns of behavior, documenting them, getting experts involved in the core system, such as therapists, teachers, counselors, guidance counselors, school administration, or having some sort of email exchange back and forth with the teachers. So there is actually tangible evidence going back and forth, record of what's going on behaviorally or academically with the child, and how the child is changing based on the alienation that's happening. So that's one thing that is it can be somewhat helpful when dealing with a core system, which again, we're dealing with a broken system.
Can I jump in here for a second?
Sure.
One of the questions that I know dealing with and talked to some experts, it was the reference to the DSM. So in my situation, I had a conversation with the attorney and they said, how did they evaluate me? And she had the DSM and she said, well, you're a juvenile delinquent. So I laughed. She didn't. I said, you got to be kidding me, right? But that was the analysis. So in this question of parental alienation, is it or is it not going to be in the DSM? So I'd wonder if you could just elaborate on it, because
it's kind of the medical community is widely rejecting it as a syndrome. It is, and the term is not official yet, but with it becoming more of a understood perception and term, just because it's not in the DSM-5 now, there's revisions, there's DSM additions that it might show up, especially if there is a gained momentum with this terminology and how parents that target, there's certain characteristics that they do to cause the targeting to happen. And so I think might not be in there now. It's not as a mainstream term right now. It's becoming more and more. And when it does, I think you'll see it in the DSM as a syndrome. Mm-hmm.
That's helpful.
Yeah. So documentation is what should one do if they're being alienated by the other parent. Expert witnesses, obviously, alienation can and is difficult to prove in court. That's why hearsay is not something I would recommend. Anything tangible, especially if you're an email thread, testimonies, expert witnesses, coaches, teachers that notice any changes, and any kind of witnesses is going to be super helpful. And again, the alienation can be very subtle, and I think the parent who's experiencing it should start keeping a journal of what the child is telling you, and how the child appears when they're telling you. And like I said, it's crucial to show like kind of a pattern, especially if they're coming back from the targeted parent's house. You want to see a patternistic time, dates on a calendar per se, and seeing when those behaviors kind of manifest themselves.
I think that's a great idea. I know one thing that I did was keep a journal on what was said by my children and what was happening as far as events, but I never kept an observation of how they reacted or their feelings or how, their behavior was after a certain event. That was something I probably could have done a little bit better. So I just wanted to take a pause there for a minute for the audience to make sure, if you're in the middle of this, to make sure you're documenting.
Yeah, not just the content of what's being said, but how it's being said, their behavior thereafter, particularly a day after they come back. You want to notice behavioral changes, observations. They might, if you ask them directly, they might not tell you directly what's going on, but a lot could be denoted by an observation or observations that have been patternistic, and you can start seeing things as they kind of erupt. I would recommend like documenting on a calendar, particularly around the targeted parents' time to drop off. That's the hardest time for the child to adjust, that a day or a day and a half for the child to get its bearings and readjust back. There's another thing that I researched that I thought was really interesting. In terms of the best suggestions in terms of changes, what statistically shows research on this issue suggests that changes when presented in a court hearing and evidence proven in parental time arrangements in favor of the targeted parent is an effective strategy. Obviously, for improving the child-parent relationship and reducing distress in the child, and the court may order that the targeted parent have more parental time. Targeting parent should say have more parental time. So there is more of a time to build that relationship up, and less time with the person, the parent that's targeting.
I think that's very interesting. I find that interesting, and Mick's going to know what I probably say here, because this week there was just a turn in the case where the guardian ad litem, which is the attorney that represents the children's views and best interest of the children, and according to Ohio law, and he recommended that we have a whole year of non-reunification between me and my boys. And so it's very interesting you're saying that more time is usually given, but I wanted to point out to the audience that's where the system is broken. So even though it's recommended by a professional, maybe another professional doesn't think that, and that's where the system is broken. And
Right.
The judge or magistrate supports that.
Yes. Well, it can go so many ways. What the judge usually starts ordering is family therapy, individual therapy, child therapy, all kinds of therapy. And it's obviously it's suggested to try to pan out the family matters before coming to a court. However, sometimes that's just very impossible, because you're dealing with a parent that's just very, very challenging to deal with, and it just does not work that way. Obviously, that would be ideal in an ideal situation. Hence, we wouldn't need a court system.
Yes.
So I just feel. I mean, again, it all stems from a system that even when I did my investigation on domestic violence survivors, how the system, and in the system, not just the system, like was ensure parental rights. What happens if you have some glove box and you have a restraining order sort of child? I mean, it's really going to be taking that document out, and it's going to be the discretion of the formal support that is going. Sometimes they do abide by, and sometimes they don't. It just depends on the formal support, which entails needs additional on these issues.
And it seems like again, just to ask your opinion, this court seems to say, well, if there's a conflict, let's keep the parents out and away from the children. But how does that help? Because there are other theories that are saying, well, you still have to have access to the children and you still have to co-parent, because if they were agreeable, then you wouldn't need a court system, like you said.
Right.
But you're still denying a parent the access to the child and the child access to the parent. So it seems better to continue that and to make sure that mom or dad still has access, because the child still needs a mother and a father.
Well, it's just, that's true. That's true. I've seen any family system cases where the parent, one of the parents, pretty much the contentious parent, is there of dysfunction there that is doesn't maybe not serves the best interests of the child, even though it's important to have both a mother and a father. Sometimes there are times where, and this is again up to the court's discretion and the evidence that is proven. And this is where the title of unfit parent comes along, where a parent might not be able or capable, even though there's a desire to, co-parent and be able to, have access to the child. Maybe the parent is just not capable or able to stability-wise, functionality-wise, to do that. So situation, obviously, that's an extreme situation. So yeah.
Can you talk to us a little bit about what to look for in the children during a divorce behaviorally? You kind of mentioned some of those behaviors, or maybe where they might change. Let's talk about those a little bit.
Absolutely. So I think a couple things. There's about I want to just denote about four basic behaviors to really look for, especially when your child comes home from the parent that's doing the targeting. Mental health problems. Obviously, divorce increases mental health problems in children, particularly in adolescents, regardless of their age, gender, culture. Divorced parents, children parents have experienced increased psychological issues, and adjustment in children that resolves within a few months. But studies have also shown that depression, anxieties are higher in children from divorced parents. So observing, again, behaviors, depression, anxiety that are prevalent after divorce, or there shortly thereafter. Anytime there's a divorce, it always has to be assessed. It can never be kind of swept under the rug. You're going to see number two, behavioral problems. They may experience more externalizing behaviors, such as conduct disorders, delinquency, impulsive behaviors, than kids from two-parent families. And also a lot of conflicts with either one of the parents or both parents, or look for another, because they're trying to, academics are trying to adjust as well. A published study in 2019 suggested divorced families tended to have trouble with school if the divorce was unexpected, whereas the children from families where divorce was likely to have the same outcome, like a shock to the system for the child or for the adolescent who's not anticipating any kind of separation or divorce, is more problematic child in terms of academics. And the last thing is risk-taking behaviors, particularly for adolescents with divorced parents. They're more likely to engage in risky behaviors such as substance abuse and sexual activity. In the United States, adolescents with divorced parents drink alcohol early and higher rates of alcohol and marijuana tobacco use than their peers. Adolescents whose parents divorced when they're 5 years or younger were particularly at high risk for becoming sexually active prior to the age of 16. And according to a study published in 2010, separation from fathers has also been associated with high numbers of sexual partners during adolescence.
Wow. So lots of different things that can happen to our children at different stages.
At different stages, at different developmental stages, at different, even, at the beginning of a divorce, while the divorce is happening, obviously when it's finalized, and thereafter, it constantly has to be talked about, addressed during these different age developments.
If it is not addressed at those age developments, do you see results as adults as they continue to age?
You see what has been unresolved as a child in an adult in therapy. That's because it hasn't been addressed, hasn't been talked about, hasn't been communicated about. it stays until it becomes an adult, and then as an adult, it's perceived very differently as it was in a child, and that's hence a lot of the reasons why the adults do come into therapy, is to resolve that and heal that inner child.
When I hear those statistics, they're bleak. And what I hear when you say those things is that this is an argument in favor of making sure that the child has access to both parents. And that's what I hear. And this is why it's so frustrating to deal with a court that will push the alienated parent out of the child's life when the
Yeah.
statistics are so clear to show that that child needs access and vice versa. That's what's so frustrating about the system.
It is. It's very frustrating, particularly if you are, if you know, if you are if you're not an unfit parent and you're a good parent and you're just, particularly for fathers, this happens a lot for fathers who really try to be in their child's life and they're not able to, and it's super hurtful for the father. This happens usually in situations with fathers, and I've seen this a lot in my practice with fathers who are of a different cultural background, who want to be involved in their child's life and are not able to, and they're not an unfit parent, not deemed unfit. In fact, deemed actually. What perception is skewed, but they're doing everything that they can to be involved, even when the stakes are against them.
Yeah. So go ahead, Mick.
I was going to say, Kendra doesn't need me to be an advocate for her, but as she has shared, this is what I feel so frustrating, frankly, on this situation that she is in. She is obviously a very fit parent,
Mm-hmm.
and she's done everything that she can. And yet it's very frustrating to hear this situation because it's so common. And this is exactly what she's experiencing. The court is saying, no, take more of a step back. And she is not doing anything that would be untoward by a parent. This is what a mother
Right.
should be doing. She should be involved. That's what's so unfair and wrong about the system.
Right, exactly. And what it sounds like is, because you instill structure and discipline, and you may not be the favored parent, like in the here and now, just hold on, because core systems don't, they turn a certain, it sucks because, as we talked about in the first segment, as the child grows and evolves, then their maturity and their understanding of really what you're trying to accomplish absolutely takes a turn and a shift. So I like we talked about last time, I know it's very easy, and I get it. It's super frustrating. That's only in the here and now. Long term, it's not. It's gonna take a shift. You just keep doing what you're doing and trying to be as consistent as you possibly can, because that's gonna instill security in the child.
That is an absolute great point. So maybe we can talk a minute about parents that might be separated from their children. What is the best way to keep moving forward with them when it's very hard to have any type of relationship?
Yeah, some sort of access to them. Obviously, sometimes, obviously, the goal is to be at a point where you're not doing it through the parent that's alienating. That's because that's going to get skewed big time. Having just your own kind of communication device, some sort of segue where there is communication, so the child knows that you love and that you are in their corner, and you're trying to gain access to the child. And when there is a communication or alone time with the child, developing some sort of system where there is just one-on-one communication somehow, some way. Usually it's not. Sometimes it's not the best through the parent that's targeting, obviously, but letting the child know, that just reassuring them that you love them, that you care for them, regardless of what anybody else says in their lives, that that you'll always be there for them. And it's crucial, particularly at younger ages when there isn't as easily accessible.
Yeah, and that is great advice. I will throw in a quick nugget for our listeners. So I've been separated from my youngest for a year and a half, absolutely no contact. He has blocked me from his phone, will not answer the phone when, dad and I set up a call. The oldest has been about 4 years. So trying to interact with them has been very difficult. And I just want to tell parents that there are ways to go around being blocked. You can show up to their events. You can stand on the opposite sideline, right? You can send cards. You can send momentums. And I say that because presents might not always be the answer, because you don't want to be that Disney parent or that Ronald McDonald that we talked about before.
Exactly.
But you can always send, like, I put together a bunch of pictures and it was memories of different things. And I sent it to them, and I sent their little stuffed animals that were on the bed. And so whether the boxes or the cards makes it to them, the effort, I guess, is there. And maybe they'll know, maybe they won't one day. But
Right.
just a nugget for our listeners. So if you don't have direct contact, you can always try different things. And I know there's different ways of social media if they're not blocking you at the time. But just know they're watching you. And I have figured that out through different ways that they have reached out to me. They're watching. They're following you. Everything's on the internet.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that I do like that you said is like showing up to one of their sporting events, like without just doing the research and showing up at one of their events is a great way to just, have access, see your child, support them, especially if you don't have the access to them. In your situation, Kendra, they may have blocked your communication, but in the here and now, they're going to want to restore a relationship with you. They need their mom, they need their dad. They're going to restore a relationship with you eventually down the road. It may not be when you're ready or when you need it. It will be when they are in a position where they're able to.
Yep. And that's what I hang on hope to. So, and that's what I for a lot of the people that reach out to me saying, how do you do it? Because I'm in that situation. And I just say, you just have to pray and wait. It's just time.
It is. It's time. But that time that you do take, you still evoke with showing some sort of effort, knowing that they're watching, knowing that they're mindful and aware of what you are doing, and you want to be just try as much as you can to be as resourceful to them as you are permitted to or accessible to. So that's also very important. And then, once time evolves and a connection is made, a completely different dynamic and understanding and relationship can be formed. And it's like kind of like a new start for the dynamic. That needs to happen, not just for you, but also for the child as well. That is now maybe a young adult, a teenager, whatever the case may be.
Yeah. So if you could touch on that just for a minute, what is the best way to re-engage and reunite with a child that's been separated for you for, say, 10 years or so? Do you go back to the start and rehash what happened? Or do you let them lead the conversation? Or do you just move on and act like nothing happened?
I think that's one of the worst things that you can do is act like never in a case where there's been a disruption that you want to pretend it didn't happen. That's like the pink elephant in the room. It's not authentic. It's not, you both know that something has happened. I think bringing it to the forefront, whether it's them leading you to that place, you want to try to give them some space in which to see if they can take the initiative. Eventually has to come to head. In a way, and have them see kind of like from you what your perspective has been all along, and what you have been trying to do and have been blocked from doing, and how maybe that stage expressing how frustrating and how demoralizing it was not to have the relationship and that could have been. However, it was, you understand that it may not have been their fault, and try not to place blame onto them, but understand that you have always, even if not present visibly or vocally, you've always been in their hearts, in your hearts, and in their corner. And I think the worst thing that you can do is just bypass that disruption. It's been a disruption in your life and in theirs, whether it's by their own hand or by the parent that's doing the targeting.
Great advice. Wonderful advice.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I had a really simple thing because I said how difficult it was to make contact with my daughter at the time. She was between 5 and 8 years old. So as she would be trailing off somewhere or going away in a car, I would do a little "I love you" signal,
Mm-hmm.
and that was it. But it was a little signal because you didn't have to say anything, and there was no confrontation, and it was so quick and easy. And she's in the back seat, and just quick, give me the sign, and so I did. So it's a simple thing, but I think your advice really is to say to be present to the child is any way that you can, and what the child will get after a while. And if they mature enough, and hopefully in Kendra's situation, these kids grow up and mature, they say, Mom was pulling for you the whole time. And we had this thing, but I was doing everything I can. And I talk about my feelings and how hurt I was during that period.
Right. Absolutely. And it will come to the forefront. It will come to the forefront, and how you re-engage with them, is going to be, obviously not everything has to be on the child's terms. You're a part of this process too, and you've been affected by this process as well. And so I think coming at them in a way that lets them know that you are, regardless of them not speaking to you by whatever means, whether their own or by someone else, that you were always in their corner, and that you're just happy that there is an established reconnection, and hopefully for future, rebuilding of a foundation that may have been cracked, and maybe not by the child, or not by you, but the disgruntled parent that's trying to keep it alienated.
Yes. Yes. Great advice. Wonderful advice. And hopefully the listeners benefited from that as well, and me sharing a little bit of my personal story.
Absolutely. And I know it's, listen, the system is flawed and needs a lot of working to do. And there's, the formal supports that are formal supports aren't necessarily extremely knowledgeable about the changes that are happening societal wise, and what people need, and what actions to be taken that are necessary for it to be the supports to be effective. And even your informal supports may not always know exactly what to say and when to say it to give you the support as you're going through this, and that's also very challenging. So I mean, you guys can absolutely write a book about what is helpful, what is not helpful, experiencing these types of situations that you both are in. And I think the more information that's out there, and the more experiences people share, they're different, but they're the same type of theme happening for many different parents. And that's why education and communication and trainings are extremely important for people that are going through it, people that have loved ones going through it, and people that are helping those formally going through it.
Yes.
I think there's people that when they start hearing about these situations, they never seem to be resolved. And when you talk to people, the same people you talk to, after a while, they sort of tune you out because they're like, well, why doesn't this get settled? And they sort of like, you're just, beating a dead horse. But this is the situation we're in. It's expensive. It takes a long time, and you can't get out of it. And then it's very difficult for people to understand, why it can't be resolved. But that's why they start tuning you out. But you do have to find those people and say, so my best buddy's going through this situation. I go, I get it. People start tuning him out because he keeps saying the same thing. Well, he's not near his child. So, I mean, it's painful. And
Yes.
it's very difficult to talk to people about this because that's the thing that dominates their thoughts. So you have to find the right people and share what you can.
Yeah, particularly people that are in a position to make change happen. That's what I would call advocacy in the best form. Like obviously you want to talk to people that have the ability of some sort to make some sort of change happen, so the narrative can change and the story can change. um, I think they're talking to your friends and talking to people and just talking about it is helpful, um, but I think people that can actually make some change happen will be even more helpful, and then and some sort of advocacy pyramid of some sort.
Completely agree. And that's definitely one of my aspirations here is to get the law changed in Ohio. So I would encourage any of our listeners that are in the states, you can always reach out to your local rep and figure out who your local rep is in your state and ask them for some help. Talk to them about the situation and let them know that the law needs changed.
Yeah. And there's a lot to be said and more in groups of people and masses of people. So I feel like getting groups together, getting people together in order to address a systemic issue that needs to be altered and changed in the legal system. There's more strength in masses of people and voices saying the same thing.
Completely agree. And I know that's what Mick and I are trying to do here is establish those groups and masses and capture their attention and help educate.
Absolutely.
So, Michele, thank you so much for being on today. You were a wealth of knowledge.
Thank
Mick, you want to
you.
close us out?
Sure. And I think we need a reminder for anybody listening. Yes, we are here for you. You are not alone. And this is a place where hopefully have some healing. So if you like the aftermath, please like, subscribe, share, positively review to keep these shows going. So thank you, Dr. Finneran, for being here. Phenomenal having you coming back. We appreciate your time and all of their wisdom and expertise. We appreciate your time. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for both for having me again. I appreciate it.
All right, guys, until next time, we'll see you. We've got another exciting episode coming your way. Until next time, Deus Vult.